So hello everybody. Hello. As Chris said, I'm going to talk about vitamin K2, or menoquinone as it's called. Now Chris and I got interested in K2 at the ICAK meeting in Chicago where Chris was speaking. And one of the trade stands had a display of emu oil. So we went to have a look at this emu oil, and it had good things in, a bit like our oils. It had omega-3 and 6 and 9. And the lady at the trade stand said, oh, it contains K2 as well. I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then she said, K2 is very good for fighting wrinkles. So my ears immediately pricked up, and I bought 3 bottles. And then I went home and tried it. So they were in big bottles, so I decanted it into smaller bottles so I could use it. And the jug I'd been using, I put my hand around it. You didn't want to waste a drop. So I put it all up my arms, up my legs, not to waste it at all. And then I went into the lounge, and my dog was lying on his bed, which he normally does all the time. And he perked up immediately as I walked in, which is quite unusual. Normally, he doesn't get excited except when the postman comes. And he came his nose twitching, he came heading towards me super fast and was madly licking my legs. So clearly, dogs love emu oil. I must have smelt really, really tasty. So I did use it for a while on my face, but it does sort of solidify. It must be quite high in saturated fats as well, because you've got sort of lumps of, looks a bit like lard in it. So it probably wasn't the best, and there's probably something much better for people who live in our hemisphere than emu oil. Anyway, it got us thinking about K2. There we go. There we go. So the main function of K2 is to regulate calcium. Now it puts calcium where you want it in the body, and it takes it away from areas where you don't want it. So it puts it into bone, and it takes it out of arteries and veins. So in this way, it helps us with one of the two major diseases of our time, really, osteoporosis and arteriosclerosis. So it helps fight those 2 diseases, so it's really very important for us. So K2, how it works is it activates 2 proteins. There's one protein called osteocalcin, and that puts calcium into the bones and the teeth. And there's another protein called MGP, or matrix GLA protein, which takes calcium away from the arteries and the veins. And K2 is the cofactor for these 2 enzymes. So without K2, these 2 enzymes can't work. So then you get a build-up of calcium in the wrong place in the body, particularly in the arteries. So when this enzyme is activated by K2, it alters the structure of it so that it can bind on to calcium. So we can see here in this diagram, you've got the vitamin K2 dependent protein, and that links with glutamate, the amino acid glutamate. So if you're short in glutamate, you won't be making these K2 dependent proteins to start with. And it has a side chain of glutamate, and it gets activated by K2 with a cofactor of carbon dioxide. So then you end up with 2 carboxyl groups. If you see over there, there's 2 carboxyl groups there, 1 carboxyl group from the glutamate, and 1 from the carbon dioxide here. And it's these 2 carboxyl groups which attach onto the calcium and move it around the body. So when it's activated like this, we call it's carboxylated. So it's carboxylated and fully active at that stage. So where do we get our K2 from? Well, we get it from the diet. We get it from mainly animal fat products. Now the problem really, they're not very popular, not very fashionable because of the association with putting on weight. So we probably don't get enough K2 in our diet. And also we get it from bacterial synthesis in the gut. Now unfortunately, most of our patients don't have the right balance of bacteria in the gut, so they're not going to be making the right type of K2. Well, not making K2 at all. So really the dietary sources of K2 are eggs, butter, and cheese is very, very good. And particularly Gouda and Brie. Now, I don't eat much cheese. I think it's fattening. So, now I'm reconsidering whether I should eat a bit of brie every now and again. So I've started to eat brie again. Egg yolks are a rich source, but obviously it's got to be a good quality egg. It's got to be, free range and organic, so it's got the K2 in it. Butter's a good source, but from our testing, we find it's the unpasteurized butter which has the higher level of K2. And then we've got goose and chicken liver. They're very high in K2. And the goose liver pâté is a good source of K2, the pâté de foie gras. And this reminds me of when Chris and I went to Bordeaux on an ICAK meeting. And we had 3 nights in Bordeaux, and we were thinking, great, we're going to have some wonderful French food. So the first night we went out, we went to a local restaurant by ourselves, and we had the speciality menu. And the first course was pâté de foie gras. Oh, lovely. Very nice. The second night, we had an organised trip to a vineyard, and the meal was included. And the first course was pâté de foie gras. Oh, more pâté. It was great. And it was quite late by the time we had the meal. It was about 10 o'clock. So this pâté de foie gras sort of sat on your stomach all night. And then the third night, we had the conference gala dinner. So they were going to put on a sort of special menu, specialities of the region. And the first course was pâté de foie gras. So poor Chris, by this time, he was heartily sick of pâté de foie gras. And you've all heard he has a gallbladder issue anyway. So this fat was sort of sitting in his stomach, not being really properly dealt with by his gallbladder. And he did suffer later on that night, poor thing. But he hasn't eaten pâté de foie gras since. So in terms of the quality of the food we eat, it's got to be high quality to contain the K2. And it's not really just the milk in the cheese, it's the fact that cheese is made from bacteria, which gives it the very high level of K2. If you see here, we've got one in the milk from a good grass-fed cow, contains 1 microgram per 100 ml. But if you make the cheese from that by adding bacteria, then the K2 content goes up to 76 micrograms per 100 grams. So here's the structure of K2. The first one here is just K1, to show as an example. K1 is really just for the clotting factors, nothing to do with calcium. It's K2 that deals with the calcium. And there's 2 subtypes of K2. There's MK4 and MK7. As you can see from the diagram here, the MK4 has a shorter hydrocarbon tail. It has 4 double bonds there, whereas the MK7 has a longer tail of 7 double bonds. So the K2 we get from the diet is mainly the shorter chain, the MK4. And the problem with that, it has a very short half-life. So if you had MK4 as a supplement, then it wouldn't stay in the circulation for very long. So you'd have to take it several times a day. And most MK4 supplements are synthetic because nobody has yet found a way to extract it from the butter and the eggs and make it a viable product. So MK7 is the other structure of K2, the other subtype. And this is generally made from natto. Now, natto is boiled soya beans, which I think it's as appetizing as it sounds, really. And how they got to find out about natto is a nice story. The Japanese army centuries ago were fighting. They'd fought their battle and they went off to camp for the night. They started to boil up their soya beans, and then they discovered they were going to be attacked. So they quickly had to pack up camp, pack up their soya beans, and they put them into straw sacks. So by the time they'd, recamped again, opened up the straw sacks, the soya beans had gone into this sort of slushy mess, which is natto. But it had very good health benefits. So what they do now when they make natto, they don't put it in straw sacks anymore. They add a particular bacteria to the soya beans to make natto. And the bacteria they add is Bacillus subtilis natto, which is the one that Chris was talking about. And it's this B subtilis which produces the K2 in our gut. And in the animal world, they do give it to animals quite a lot because then it produces the K2 for them in their gut. So this is what we need. We're going to have this product fairly soon. It's on order. So you all have a test vial, I think. If not, we can organise a test vial for you. Because really we found in our testing that the majority of people are deficient in this B subtilis. So this natto is the MK7 form. So if you have enough subtilis in your gut, you'll make the MK7. So the MK7 lasts for much longer in the body. The liver clears out the MK4 quite quickly, but the MK7 attaches to LDL and VLDL, and so it stays around in the liver much longer. So you've got a longer half-life, so just taking a single dose in the morning would be enough. We mustn't forget that this K2 is a fat-soluble vitamin, so it needs to be in a fat medium. We're going to be ordering some K2 oil, which is on order, so it's going to arrive very soon. And that's the best way to take, really, K2 in an oil. And we heard yesterday from Chris how the only oil which really works with K2 is the organic black cumin seed oil. We tested it using olive oil, sesame, and I think pumpkin, and it really didn't strengthen. It had to be in the black cumin seed oil. So the way K2 moves calcium out of the arteries and veins is brilliant for fighting arteriosclerosis, which is where you get the deposits of calcium and fatty substances in the lining of the arteries. And what happens then, you get a reduced blood flow, and you can also get clots when bits of arteries break off and rupture. So if you get a blocked vessel leading to the heart, you get a heart attack, and if you get a blocked vessel leading to the brain, then you get a stroke. So we need plenty of K2 to stop this happening. So it's this protein, the MGP, the matrix GLA protein, which prevents this tissue calcification in the arteries. But there are a couple of other K2-dependent proteins. There's one called GAS6, growth arrest specific gene 6, which promotes clearance of dead smooth muscle cells from the arteries. Because if they sit in the arteries, they can act as an anchor for fats to attach to and block the arteries further. There's another K2-dependent protein, protein S, this is called. And this encourages the immune system to gently take out the arterial rubbish rather than launching a full-on inflammatory attack, which would then lead to clogging up the arteries even more. So in 2004, in the Journal of Nutrition, they published a Rotterdam study where they had evaluated 8,000 men and women aged over 55, and those with a high intake of dietary K2 had a much reduced risk of arterial calcification and death from cardiovascular disease. So also it helps enormously in osteoporosis. It puts the calcium back into the bones. And as we know, osteoporosis is a loss of the bone mineral density, and the bones become very fragile and porous, so they're liable to breaking. And this occurs when you've got an imbalance between the osteoblasts, which build new bone, and the osteoclasts, which clean out old bone. So these osteoblasts and osteoclasts, they secrete osteocalcin, and that's what needs to be activated by K2. So without K2, the osteocalcin would be what we call uncarboxylated, so it would be inactive, and it would probably add to the build-up in the arteries. There's other conditions that are helped by K2. Diabetes, in diabetes, K2 causes the pancreas to secrete more insulin, and it increases the sensitivity of the cells to insulin, so that insulin is going to work much better. It's also helpful for male fertility. The bones in males secrete osteocalcin, and this helps then regulate their testosterone production. Varicose veins, apparently it's good in varicose veins. We know varicose veins are caused by a loss of collagen, but also you can get calcification in there. And wrinkles, the reason why it helps wrinkles is the elastic fibers of the skin can become calcified. So if you're short of K2, you're going to get a buildup of calcium in the elastin, which is going to cause wrinkles. And in terms of teeth, it helps with dental cavities. It puts calcium back into the teeth. And it helps with the development of the dental arch, so that children can have a nice broad dental arch. This was noted by Weston Price, the dentist. Weston Price did work on this. And actually, it does decalcify tissues in a lot of conditions. I know Martin asked me earlier about, does it decalcify the pineal? And Chris and I have talked about this, and we think it would decalcify the pineal. And Chris has used it with people with lung problems, and it's helped to decalcify there as well. So really, anywhere where you get a calcium build-up, it's worth testing for K2. There's a lot of literature about how it helps in cancer prevention. In 2010, the European Perspective investigation was made into cancer and nutrition, and they found that people with a high K2 diet had a much reduced risk of developing cancer and also surviving cancer. Well, if you had higher levels of K2, more chance of surviving cancer. So they looked at 24,000 men and women between the age of 35 to 64 for a period of 10 years. And they did find those with the higher consumption of cheese, because it was done in a European area, so they didn't have natto. But those who consumed more cheese had a higher level of K2 and reduced the risk of developing cancer. So a lot of studies have been done into prostate cancer, and it seems to be the fastest growing area where they're looking into K2 benefits. And it's been shown to suppress growth in types of lung cancer as well. And in leukemia, the K2 seems to induce apoptosis of the white blood cells, so that's going to help with leukemia. It's been shown to help with liver cancer, and it's very good for the liver in terms of beneficial for cirrhosis, but it's just good for the liver in general. So many tumours, including breast and prostate cancer, have been shown to actually produce this MGP protein. So from this, it's been suggested that uncarboxylated MGP is bad for cancer. So what this MGP needs is it needs K2 and D3 to activate it. And it's been suggested that maybe the malignant tissue contains a solution to its own problem by producing this MGP. So the body would need to supply the K2 and the D3. There's more recent research been done on K2. Professor Traber from the Linus Pauling Institute was speaking this year in September. And she said that low K2, she thinks, is a key factor in prostate cancer as opposed to vitamin E, which recently that's been the belief that vitamin E helps in case of prostate cancer. She thought this was the case because K2 and vitamin E have a similar structure, and she thought that had led to confusion. Where really K2 she thought was the main benefit. But she did say more research was required into that. And also she indicated that K2 is good for the brain. She said that K2 is huge in the brain, but nobody is researching it. So maybe there'll be more research into K2 in the brain. Just a word of warning really about anticoagulant treatment and K2. So if people want warfarin, the literature does say maybe you should contact the doctor if you're going to give K2. Because studies have shown that there's an association between taking these oral anticoagulants and a reduced bone density. They found increased blood levels of this undercarboxylated osteocalcin. And they don't seem to be exactly sure how this works because K1 is the vitamin that warfarin interferes with the recycling of, because K1 is the blood clotting vitamin, and warfarin wants to thin the blood, so you don't have to have too much K1 when you're on warfarin. But it does seem to interfere with the K2 mechanism as well, because it's been linked to such high levels of tissue calcification, which really is quite ironic. You're taking warfarin to help with your heart condition, and then it can be making it worse by calcifying the tissues. So all these fat-soluble vitamins work together, the vitamin D, vitamin A, vitamin K. As we know, vitamin D increases the absorption of calcium from the intestines and stores it in the liver and kidney. And then vitamin D activates the osteoblasts to make new bone, and vitamin A activates the osteoclasts, so they work together to clear away new bone and clear away old bone and build new bone. This is what we've seen before. So all the activated forms of D, a patient could need any of these. Chris talked about this yesterday. We've got the cholecalciferol here, the 25 cholecalciferol, 125 and the 24-25. And we saw with the people we were testing that they can need either one of those. And our Smart D3 does all those activated forms, so there's no point giving a patient just straight cholecalciferol and K2 together if they need an activated form. So if they need the 24-25 here, it's got to be the active form that they get, so you need to give them the Smart D3. So here we've got another activated form of D3, which we've recently discovered. Chris has recently looked into this. And this is the 125 and the 24-25 together. So that's how you test it. You test it with those two test vials together. And that's the 124-25 activated form. And this is what Western Price called Activator X. So if your patient strengthens to this form, they will need the D3 and the K2. So A and D work together to regulate the activity of genes that cause the cells to produce these proteins, these two proteins, osteocalcin and MGP. And vitamin D increases the production of them, and vitamin A suppresses it. So they're working in balance as well. So you need to make sure your patient has got enough vitamin D and enough vitamin A. So then vitamin K2 comes along and then activates these proteins and transports the calcium to the right place in the body. So that's going to be into the bones and the teeth. So too much vitamin D could lead to inappropriate calcification if you don't take sufficient amounts of K2. So always test your patients for K2 when you're putting them on vitamin D3. So the products that we're going to be doing for K2, there's going to be the bacteria, the B. subtilis, and that's the bacteria that will ferment in the gut and will produce the K2 for you. So that's probably the most natural way to do it. The vitamin K2 from natto capsules, which you should all have a sample of. And then we're going to be getting a K2 oil as well. We're going to put the K2 into black cumin seed oil so that it's activated and works really well in the body. We did consider doing Smart D3 and K2 together, but I think we found from clinical experience that people will need different quantities of both. Some will need more D3, some will have a better diet of K2, so won't need so much K2. So the best way to do it is to have two separate products and dose each of them like we did on Anne yesterday. There we go, that's K2.